my God, it is so hot today. According to statistics, there are 1.9 billion people who own air conditioners on Earth. On average, each of these units create 2 tons of carbon per year. That adds up to 3.8 billion tons of carbon. Let me put this into perspective for you. 3.8 billion tons of carbon is enough to fill up 75 million Olympic-sized swimming pools to the brim with pure carbon dioxide. A few weeks prior to starting Quest, I found out about the ways that Balinese used to cool their water. They did this by using pots called gentong. The pots were only half burnt, so the water could penetrate through the walls and evaporate on the outside. This evaporation cooled the water. If only the same technique could work with a house. I started research and then knew exactly what I wanted to do. The idea that I had in mind was to build a model of a house that could cool itself without electricity. Through further research, I visited 3 architects in Bali. The first architect's name is Trika, and he makes a lot of small bamboo models using bamboo splits. He had also designed the popular restaurant building in Canggu called Loco by Nature. He gave me a lot of useful information that I did not know before, and the hands-on experience was everything I needed. Well, at least I thought so. The second architect I visited is called Alessandro, and he built a house for himself and his family in Bali. Finally, I went to a Balinese compound called Pondok Jaka. Its houses were built with mud walls and small windows without glass. Mud walls have been used in Bali for centuries. At that moment, I realized how effective they are to keeping a house cool, because when I walked into the first building, I could instantly feel the difference in temperature. At this point in time, we are able to turn our rooms to 18 degrees with the press of a button. From my research, I was able to highlight a number of different ways to create that satisfying cooling effect. At Pondok Jaka, I realized that glass windows can make a house very hot. They create something called the greenhouse effect. The way it works is that the rays of sun, also known as UV rays, can pass through the glass with ease. But as soon as they hit an object that is not see-through, it becomes hot and the heat gets trapped in the house. Color. Another way to keep something cool is the color. The color black is the ultimate heat absorber, making it hot. But white, on the other hand, is reflective, and that's why it's cooler and also brighter. The architect Alessandro built his house using black tiles for his roof because they looked more aesthetically pleasing. This, he later realized, was a big mistake because he turned his house into an oven. Another example to keep a house cool would be evaporation from a natural water source. For example, a river. A technique used by the ancient Persians was to divert water from a river into a reservoir going underneath their houses. The heat from the house could escape through the openings in the roof. This created underpressure. The underpressure acted like a vacuum, sucking the cool air up from the water canal. At the same time, it created a pleasant draft. This was a way of creating wind artificially, and it dated back all the way to 550 BC, but is still a cooling technique used today. Natural wind is a very efficient way to cool buildings. It was used a lot more before AC came into play, but is still very common here in Bali. When I visited the Balinese compound, the houses had openings for wind to enter and flow through it. Wind can be controlled easily. done, but it's very smoky. Okay. Wind can be controlled easily. The easiest method is allowing wind to pass through your house is by having your windows and doors open, or by designing your house in a way that wind can flow through easily. You might be wondering how I incorporated all of these different aspects into my design. Well, if you'll excuse me, I can tell you now. Now I got hands-on with different experiments. I initially went with a dome shape using bamboo. However, I soon realized this design was too complicated to generate the symmetry I needed. I would have a weak structure, and I don't think anyone here wants a house collapsing on their head. Keeping it simple was more effective, and by doubling up the simple design, I was able to make it a lot stronger. The next experiment was all about temperature. On that day, the average temperature was about 34 degrees, but in the direct sun, it was a sweltering 44 degrees. I measured the temperature of my bamboo structure in 3 different situations. 1, fully covered with cloth. 2, when it was shaded by a banana leaf. And 3, when it was covered with cloth, but allowing natural wind to pass through and an opening in the top. As you can see from my slide, natural shade brings down the temperature by 1 degree, and natural airflow brings down the temperature by 2 degrees. This was good, but not good enough. I dug a hole into the ground and stuck the thermometer in. The temperature measured only 29 degrees, 3 degrees less. Through further research, I learned that the ground has a much more constant temperature than the air. The deeper you dig, the cooler it gets. Then I added mud that I gathered from the rice field. Take a look at the process. Slowly, my project started to come together. I decided to combine all of the above findings. I placed my house under the natural shade of trees. I dig a pit into the ground. There's a mud floor as well as mud for the walls. As well as mud for the walls. I create airflow by having openings in the bottom and in the roof so hot air can escape. I channel cool air from a nearby river into the house. I didn't use glass windows. And finally, the most simple thing you can do to stay cool is take off your shoes and eat watermelon. The result of the methods I used was successful. I brought down the initial temperature from 34 degrees all the way down to 28 degrees. And just for comparison, the average temperature of a living room in Bali without AC is 29 degrees. I expect the ancient Persian water cooling technique to bring down the temperature by another 3 to 4 degrees, but I couldn't incorporate this aspect into my model. If I used the methods that I experimented with above in a real house, a lot of carbon dioxide could be saved compared to using AC. The methods are simple and effective. The recent corona crisis has shown that it is more important than ever to be self-sufficient. And not dependent on global companies. To know where your stuff is coming from and to know how to both build and fix things is important. Connection to local community, local knowledge and traditions gives a sense of safety and stability. Bali still has a lot of traditional knowledge compared to other places. When I was talking to Pakwidi about traditional mud buildings, he said, "Ask the elderly people. They still know where to find clay in this area." This is what led me to explore the traditional Balinese compound. Communication played a very big role in this project. I learned to listen and ask the right questions. The strangest thing that I learned of all, though, is that Quest is like any other homework, but way more daunting. like most daunting things, it's a lot worse to worry about than actually doing it. Of course, I also learned a lot about architecture. I want to thank my mom, dad, and teachers for helping me out throughout this project, and of course, all of the architects that inspired my journey. This project has allowed me to dip my toes into the ocean of architecture. As my quest was coming to a close, I started to consider so many more aspects to creating a home rather than a house. If I were to do this all again, I would research other elements that contribute to a comfortable living environment. When I first started, I thought that 4 months was more than enough time to complete my quest, but a creative task never really has an end. Once you start, you get inspired to do more. Thanks.